Right now, you are probably alone, maybe in a room with a door you can close, maybe with headphones on, signaling to everyone around you that you do not want to be disturbed. Maybe just scrolling through your phone in a crowded room, mentally absent. Even though your body is present, you have privacy. Not perfect privacy, but options, spaces, the ability to be unseen. Your ancestors had almost none of that. For most of human history, there was no door to close, no room of your own, no concept of needing to be alone, because being alone was not really a thing that happened. And the strange part is not that ancient humans lacked privacy. The strange part is what that absence actually did to the human mind, and what it reveals about a need you carry inside you right now that your ancestors may never have felt at all. Let's start with the physical reality. Anthropologist and archaeologist Lewis Binford spent decades studying the campsites of hunter-gatherer societies, both through archaeological remains and through direct observation of modern foraging groups. What he found was strikingly consistent across cultures separated by oceans and thousands of years. Living spaces were small. Shelters housed multiple people, often multiple families, in spaces that by modern standards would feel suffocating. Sleeping arrangements placed bodies close together, both for warmth and for safety. There was no architectural division between public and private space, because there was barely any architecture at all. Picture it, a small group, somewhere between 20 and 50 people, moving together across a landscape. At night, they gather. Fires are lit. Bodies arrange themselves close to the heat and close to each other. Someone is always awake, watching for predators or threats. Someone is always within earshot. The sounds of breathing, coughing, arguing, laughing, grieving, having sex, all of it happened in a shared acoustic space that nobody could fully escape. There was no wall thick enough to block sound. There was no door to lock. There was, in the most literal sense, nowhere to hide. This raises an obvious question. If privacy as you understand it did not exist, did your ancestors suffer for its absence? Did they walk around feeling exposed and anxious the way you might if your bedroom door suddenly disappeared? The answer, according to most anthropological research, is almost certainly no. And the reason why is the most important thing to understand about this entire topic. Privacy is not a universal human need in the way that food, water, and sleep are universal human needs. Privacy is a need that gets activated by certain social and physical conditions. Remove those conditions entirely, and the need does not necessarily announce itself as a painful absence. It simply does not develop the way it develops in you. Psychologist and environmental researcher Irwin Altman, who spent much of his career studying privacy across cultures, proposed something called privacy regulation theory. His argument was that privacy is not a fixed amount of space or solitude that all humans require. Instead, privacy is a dynamic, culturally shaped process of managing how much access other people have to you, your body, your thoughts, your behavior. And critically, what counts as enough access or too much access varies enormously depending on what a person has grown up with. In many traditional societies studied by anthropologists, including various indigenous groups in the Amazon, parts of sub-Saharan Africa, and Pacific Island communities, the concept of needing to be physically alone simply does not carry the same emotional weight it carries in modern, individualistic cultures. Solitude, in many of these contexts, is not neutral. It is sometimes viewed with suspicion. A person who wants to be alone might be seen as ill, troubled, possibly even dangerous, because the assumption baked into the culture is that healthy humans want to be around other humans constantly. This flips the modern assumption on its head. You likely grew up believing that alone time is a basic psychological necessity, something everyone needs in some amount to recharge and process their thoughts. But that belief is itself a product of a particular kind of society, one with private bedrooms, individual ownership, and a cultural story that frames the self as something separate from the group. Your ancestors were not living that story. They were living a different one, where the self was constantly embedded in the group, where identity was relational rather than individual, and where the line between me and us was far blurrier than it is for you today. So what did exist, if not privacy in the modern sense? This is where the story becomes genuinely fascinating. Even in societies with zero architectural privacy, anthropologists have documented something almost universal: informal, unspoken rules about attention and acknowledgement. Sociologist Erving Goffman, though writing primarily about modern urban life, described a behavior he called civil inattention, the practice of being aware of someone's presence while deliberately not staring, not commenting, not intruding. This behavior likely has much older roots. In tightly packed communal living arrangements, people developed sophisticated social technologies for creating the feeling of privacy even when physical privacy was impossible. You could be sitting sitting 3 feet from another person and still maintain a kind of psychological distance through mutual agreement. Eyes would avert. Conversations would quiet during intimate moments. Certain topics would be addressed through gesture or euphemism rather than direct speech, allowing information to be shared without it being explicitly, awkwardly acknowledged by everyone present. Anthropologist Robert Murphy described this phenomenon among various groups as a form of social distance, distinct from physical distance. Two people could share the same small hut, the same few square meters of space, and still maintain a sense of boundary through behavior, not architecture. A turned back, a lowered voice, an agreement, never stated outright, to simply not acknowledge what was happening a few feet away. This suggests something important. The human need being served by privacy is not actually about physical separation. It is about control. Specifically, control over information about yourself, your body, your emotions, your mistakes, your vulnerabilities. Modern privacy achieves this control through walls and doors. Ancient privacy, when it existed at all, achieved a similar function through social agreements about what to notice and what to ignore. There is also the matter of psychological privacy, which is a different thing entirely from physical privacy. Your inner thoughts, your mind, your internal narrative. This has always been private in every era of human existence, simply by virtue of being unobservable. No one in a hunter-gatherer band could read another person's mind any more than you can read the mind of the stranger sitting next to you on a train. In this sense, the most fundamental form of privacy, the privacy of consciousness itself, what has changed dramatically is the privacy of behavior. Ancient humans had almost none. You have considerably more, depending on where and how you live. And this difference might explain something curious about modern psychology, the rise of what some researchers call privacy fatigue or solitude deprivation, alongside, paradoxically, rising rates of loneliness. Researcher John Cacioppo at the University of Chicago spent decades studying loneliness and found that humans appear to have an evolved need for social connection so powerful that its absence triggers physiological stress responses similar to physical pain. This suggests that while privacy from observation might be a modern invention, privacy from connection, genuine isolation from other humans, and your body still does not handle it well. You have more physical privacy than any human in history. You can close a door, mute a notification, disappear into a room by yourself for hours, and yet rates of loneliness are climbing in many parts of the world, specifically because that same architecture of privacy has often removed the constant, ambient, low-effort social contact that ancient humans had built into the very structure of their daily lives. Your ancestors never had a door to close, but they also never had the experience of an empty room. There is one more piece of this puzzle worth examining: shame. The emotional weight of being seen doing something embarrassing, immoral, or simply human is intensely tied to privacy in modern life. You manage your reputation carefully, in part because so much of your life happens unseen, behind doors, in private digital spaces, and the moments that do become visible carry outsized weight. In small, tightly observed ancient communities, shame functioned completely differently. Because nearly everything was visible to nearly everyone, there was less of a sharp boundary between your private self and your public self. Anthropologist Ruth Benedict, in her comparative work on shame and guilt across cultures, noted that societies with less privacy often developed more externally regulated behavior. People behaved well not because of an internalized private conscience, but because the entire community was always watching, always aware. There was no behind closed doors where a different. So did ancient humans have privacy? In the way you experience it, a door, a room, hours of being entirely alone and unseen, almost never. But in the deeper sense, the sense that actually matters psychologically, they had something different. They had social agreements. They had civil inattention. They had a community-wide understanding of what to notice and what to let pass without comment. They had a form of privacy built not from walls, but from relationships. You inherited their brain, wired for almost constant company, soothed by presence and unsettled by isolation. But you live inside architecture they never imagined. Walls, doors, screens, that gives you more solitude than your body was ever designed to expect. Tonight, when you close your door and finally feel alone, remember that the silence you are sitting in is something almost no human in history ever experienced. You have privacy. Your ancestors had each other. And somewhere in your nervous system, a very old part of you is still not entirely sure which one it actually wants.